Hello, my name's Ben.
And my name's Josh.
Welcome back to FPL Graduates and welcome back to another video. Where in today's video we're going to be going through our Gameweek 21 team reveals. If you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button before you get any further in the video. We are starting 2025 on fire and we are really looking to kick on this year with the YouTube content. So let's get straight into Josh's team.
Okay then, so yeah, off the back of Game Week 20, it was a small green arrow up to 1.2 million. Decent week. I think, more of a survival week more than most. I think there was quite a lot of returns, especially with Bruno. It seems like ages ago now, but he obviously coming away with 19 points. Quite heavily owned at my rank anyway. I'm not sure about everyone else's, but about 40% EO. So yeah, big pain that was. It probably took away quite a nice green arrow with him hauling, but the nice fixtures are out of the way now for Brentford. They've got some tough fixtures coming up, so I'm hoping that his EO does drop a little bit and we can start getting some bigger, juicier green arrows. So yeah, getting into the defence, David Raya in goal. Not expecting a clean sheet, to be honest, this week for Arsenal. I think Tottenham, despite getting held to a 0-0 draw with Tamworth in 90 minutes, I think they should be pretty good going forwards. Obviously, they were resting the likes of Solanke, Kulusevski until they had to bring them on off the bench. So, yeah, I expect goals there. I think Arsenal, in terms of defence, because they're not as good going forwards, with obviously missing Saka, etc., it does they're sort of compensating for a little bit less sort of structure at the back, I'd say. We saw United get, even with 10 men getting behind them quite a lot, obviously game state dependent with them pushing bodies forward and stuff like that. But yeah, I just think there'll be goals in that game for both teams. In the defence, Trent, obviously a lot of people worried about his minutes. He did play 60 minutes against Accrington Stanley, easy for me to say, in the FA Cup. For me, I'm not too worried. Obviously, Conor Bradley has only just come back from an injury, the same sort of time as Konate, and obviously we've seen how Konate's been managed back into the team. I think it's a similar sort of case with Conor Bradley. 60 minutes, a goal as well. I definitely would not be selling Trent Alexander-Arnold this week, as obviously lovely fixtures coming up, as well as that double in either 24 and 25. Anthony Robinson, West Ham away. Good attacking threat. Obviously, it's going to be Graham Potter's first Premier League game, so there might be some new manager bounce there. I don't think it's a clean sheet, to be honest, but I'm just hoping for some attacking returns from Robinson. Hopefully they play that sort of wing-back system that we have seen in recent weeks. And then Levi Colwill last in the defence. It's a bit of a toss-up between all three of those guys, whether it's Colwill, Mikolenko and Lewis. All pros and cons for their fixtures. Gone with Colwill just because it's a home fixture. Obviously, Bournemouth are without a renowned number 9 striker, no Evan Nilsson and Enes Unal for a sustained period of time now, both picking up quite lengthy injuries. So just hoping on the preface of that Chelsea can keep a clean sheet against Bournemouth this weekend. So yeah, Ben, overall, what's the thoughts on the defence?
Yeah, fairly strong defence going into this week. Obviously not ideal with the away fixtures, but the fixtures are good enough. I think people are worrying about Trent Alexander-Arnold before he becomes any sort of issue, which I think is a dangerous game to play because you're going to start sort of doubting yourself initially. He's not a problem until he starts getting benched, and he hasn't been getting benched recently, so I don't think there's too much to worry about in regards to minutes there. The appeal for sort of him as an asset will go up massively for that double game week regardless. So yeah, definitely one to say, look, don't need to worry too much about. The rest of the defence lends itself quite nicely. Like, I think Raya, you can't expect too many points this week. I don't think Arsenal keep that clean sheet. Robinson, I think it's a good fixture, albeit that new manager bounce could sort of have an impact in some regard. But in terms of like the attacking output, with no Bowen in that team for West Ham, the likelihood of a clean sheet does increase there for Fulham. And then Levi Colwill, of course, he's been a little bit of a disappointment, over recent game weeks, but the Bournemouth at home fixture isn't a bad one. Again, they've got injuries up top, so their structure may change slightly in terms of their attack. It may worsen their attack for Bournemouth. So let's see how they get on. I'm not anticipating sort of a huge amount of clean sheets, maybe a couple in this defence, but hopefully you can sort of complement that with a couple of attacking returns as well.
Okay, then, so yeah, moving on to the midfield, it's looking a little bit better in here. Cole Palmer starts us off. He's got Bournemouth at home this week. A decent fixture for Chelsea, I think, in general. I'm expecting them to probably win that game. I think it's been interesting with Palmer because since that Spurs haul where he got those 2 penalties, there's been a couple of 10-pointers in there and then the rest of us sort of blank. So he's going a bit hot and cold. I'd expect him to get a return in that game though. Obviously, EO-wise, him, Salah, Isak, all not really giving us too much at the moment. Bruno Fernandes is currently on the armband. I feel like this is going to be a week where I go differential. I just think that Nottingham Forest game for Liverpool, with the way that Liverpool have played in their recent games, United, Spurs, not really looking at it. They have been dangerous, don't get me wrong, but I think this is an opportunity for me, especially at my rank, to try and make some gains elsewhere. So at the moment, it's on Bruno Fernandes. Not a massive fan that he's played 120 minutes in extra time with 10 men as well. He's been absolutely running his socks off in that game. So whether it will stay on him, I'm not so sure. But for me, it will be between Bruno and Palmer as it stands. I could go to Salah, don't get me wrong. He's obviously on the vice at the moment. But yeah, I think that could be something that I look at this week rather than making a transfer to try and make those sort of gains. Anthony Gordon, obviously brought him in last week for Diogo Jota, got some nice points last week in comparison to Jota. Obviously, he only got the one. I'm really happy owning him. Lots of people looking to move to him now, so I feel like I've got sort of one step ahead of the curve with him. And then obviously, yeah, Mo Salah could be a big risk to my rank this week if I don't captain him. That's the game you're going to have to play. I think Forest, for me, though, defensively have been so solid this season. I'm just intrigued to go elsewhere. It wouldn't surprise me though if Salah does return with a 7 to 10 pointer. I just don't think we will see that haul necessarily. But yeah, obviously he's only blanked, once, twice maybe this season. So yeah, it's obviously going against the grain, but there could be some rewards off the back end of that. What's the thoughts, Ben, on the going against the grain with the captaincy, especially at my rank? Obviously, a lot to consider with that.
I think the going against the grain with the captaincy, I think, is a good shout. But the actual captain that you've got selected, I think, holds a bigger risk in captaining him than anything else, because this Southampton at home fixture is almost a prime fixture. If Amarim was going to do it, it's to rotate the team a little bit. Obviously, that could affect output. I don't think Bruno will be rotated or rested. That's not what I'm saying, but I'm thinking that the attacking output and quality of output may decrease as a result of it, due to fatigue. And if they play the same team, it'll be the fatigue. If they don't and they rotate it, will be sort of like the freshness of the players and the players sort of getting used to sort of playing with each other, being that sort of like rotation risk. So yeah, I think the Palmer captaincy could be safer to negate the risk slightly. You're taking a big risk away from Salah as well. I think to compound that with Bruno captaincy may be a step too far, but I do think like all the midfielders that you've got are potential captaincy options this week regardless.
Okay, then to wrap up the team, then we've got the three forwards. We've got Chris Wood starting for me this week. Obviously, it's a bit of a decision between, well, there's three players really. Him, João Pedro, who I'll get onto in a moment, and then obviously Morgan Rogers, who sits on my bench at the moment. I don't have a problem with starting Morgan Rogers. It's just that I really prefer starting penalty takers. It just tends to pay off more than it doesn't. Obviously, we've seen that with João Pedro, obviously last week with that penalty against Arsenal. So yeah, Wood's in there for now. He's obviously super clinical as well, especially against this Liverpool defence who, let's be honest, they've been got at by quite a few teams, especially in recent weeks. Even when they were winning, they were conceding lots of chances. So yeah, I think Chris Wood could be a beneficiary to that, so hence why he's in there. Equally, I don't mind the clash of fixture with Trent, because obviously we know Trent's attacking output is just as good as his clean sheet potential. So yeah, happy with that at the moment. Obviously, Alexander Isak is in there again, could be a potential captaincy option. I have thought about it. Eddie Howe's come out with a quote saying that he's picked up a knock and they've sort of rested him against Bromley at the weekend. I'd expect him to come straight back into that team for Wolves this week. Not really too worried about it. It's just sort of one of those things where I didn't really think he was ever going to play that Bromley game, and I'm actually quite shocked that Gordon even got 45 minutes in it. So yeah, it should be an interesting one, but I think if you've got Isak, I won't be worrying too much right now. João Pedro, obviously he's confirmed that his scan was okay. What that means, I'm not so sure. Obviously Ipswich at home this week is a good fixture. Just hoping to hear from Hertzler prior to that game. I'm not too sure when the press conferences are off the top of my head, but I'll find that out. So I could play Rodgers potentially over João Pedro if the update isn't too sort of positive from that side of things. What's your thoughts, Ben? Would you be looking to start Morgan Rogers ahead of one of those two guys?
Yeah, I mean, it'd be really tempting to start Morgan Rogers because it is the sort of game week that people are going to bench him and that sort of thing. The only sort of downside, I guess, to that is Brighton obviously playing on Thursday, which means you're just not going to get an update for that deadline on the update for João Pedro. So you almost got to take a punt and a risk on it. And I don't mind starting him. I think he either sort of starts or maybe sort of doesn't feature at all, like anything in between. I'm not too sure that's going to happen. So yeah, it's almost a case of wait and see. Like you could end up starting Pedro, and you get the minutes. If not, you've got Rodgers coming in, and I think the Rodgers sort of fixture. I would probably start him ahead of Chris Wood just because you've got Trent and you're sort of going all in then on Liverpool. But then again, it sort of depends on your confidence levels of you're getting Wood in, you're almost going against Trent. So they cut each other out. Then you vice captain in Salah. You may sort of want to sit on sort of have a think about whether you do sort of end up playing Wood or not. Okay, so moving on into my team, and we've got a couple of free transfers. We've also got, nothing in the bank at the moment to work with and to play with, and we're off the back of a really big red arrow, halving, sort of doubling the rank, sorry, to around 300k. It's not ideal at all, but it's not the time to worry too much about that. We're still in a relatively decent position. We can quickly sort of make that back because there are a couple of sort of really big differentials in my team. Starting off with the defence and the keeper, very similar to Josh. We've got Riot in goal as well. Yeah, not expecting a clean sheet. As you can see, Timber is first on the bench. He's obviously sort of come off in the FA Cup, potentially with a knock. We'll just have to see. Like, could be precautionary measure for the hamstring, but we'll just have to wait and see. Really, again, I wasn't keen on doubling up on the Arsenal defence this week, regardless. So it almost sort of solidifies my pick in sort of just going with the one Arsenal defender this week. Robinson and Trent, of course, are in there, hoping for some attacking returns from the both of them. Robinson's looks particularly good, and like I said, I don't think there's worries for me personally about Trent's minutes. And then Lewis Hall with a plum fixture against Wolves, fantastic fixture in fantastic form. Got a bit of rest, in the FA Cup. I think he only came on for sort of 20 or 30 minutes, so we should be sure of a start and hopefully a good performance. Josh, that's the defence. What's your thoughts and the potential sort of benching of Timber as well?
Yeah, I think if I had double Arsenal defence, I'd bench one of them. Probably unless it was Gabriel, would be the only sort of conception to that, because obviously his attacking threat's so lethal from set pieces. One thing about that, though, is obviously that without Bukayo Saka at the moment, I think they do become sort of less dangerous, especially from the right hand side with Erdegaard taking those. His delivery is just not at the same quality of Saka, so that's something to bear in mind, as well as Declan Rice not necessarily being nailed at the moment. Yeah, they're obviously the prime two takers for Arsenal. And I think anyone else other than Rice and Saka, it really sort of limits their threat. So yeah, for me, more than happy to bench Arsenal defenders this week if you own them. Trent and Robinson, like you say, similar to me, just hoping for the attack and returns more so than clean sheets this week, I think. Although I do feel like that Forest-Liverpool game could be quite a cagey one, especially from a Liverpool standpoint, because if they do lose that is serious pressure on them going forwards. Lewis Hall, fantastic pick this week. Obviously, the attacking threat is really there with him. Wolves at home, I don't think it's a nailed clean sheet, but you'd probably back Newcastle to do a decent defensive job in that game.
Okay, so moving on into the midfield, and as you can see, we have got Salah on the captaincy. Fairly sort of nailed on for him to be my captain this week. Obviously, there's a temptation of going with Cole Palmer, but I'm just going to back with sort of the grain and go with sort of the masses on this one. Yes, I've had a couple of really sort of quite significant red arrows over the last few weeks, but I don't think it's sort of the case that I need to panic and go too differential on the captaincy just yet, because we do have a couple of differentials in the team regardless anyway. Ismail Sarr is one of them, which I'm really excited to own this week. I think he could sort of do really, really well. Leicester, of course, came off the back of scoring 6 in the FA Cup, which was absolutely ridiculous. But I do think sort of Palace have the potential to sort of score a few goals in that game. The only concern really that I've got with the midfield at the moment in terms of a decision to make is Diogo Jota. Of course, played a lot of minutes. I think he played all 90 in the FA Cup against Accrington Stanley. Obviously scored his goal, which is good to see. Good to see that he's getting 90 minutes in that game as well. I've just got the feeling that against Nottingham Forest, like Josh said, this is a really big game, and I think it's going to be quite cagey. So I'm very much tempted to bench Jota and start João Pedro instead. Like we said, we're not going to get information before the deadline on João Pedro, but I'm thinking he's almost just as likely to start as Jota is this game week. And the thinking is obviously once they get Forest out of the way, they've got a quick turnaround before the weekend. I think at the weekend in Gameweek 22, Jota could get that start in the Premier League. Again, I'm not sort of basing that off too much evidence other than the minutes that we've seen this weekend from him. I think, a rest in midweek against Forest before playing again this weekend coming. I'm thinking that's what could happen. We'll just have to wait and see. It's the point of the season where Slot will maybe rotate in those sort of higher areas, but that's the risk we've got to take, and I'm leaning more towards benching Jota than starting him. And then to round it off, Morgan Rogers, who fairly confident in starting, and I'm absolutely not benching him this week. Of course, my benching decisions are maybe a little bit easier than Josh's, just due to sort of the quality of some of the players that I've got, and the bench sort of almost lends itself to the fixtures and a couple of sort of injuries that are in the team. Josh, what's the thoughts on the midfield and the rationale behind potentially sort of Jota being benched this week to start the weekend?
Yeah, midfield in general is really solid. Rodgers, like I said, with my team, is a fine start this week. There's no issue with that. Really good fixture, obviously coming off the back of a goal as well in the FA Cup against West Ham. Sarr, I love. He's one of those. I don't have Palace in my team. It's one of those weeks where I wish I did. There's lots of good fixtures. I know him and Eze played some good minutes against Stockport in the FA Cup, but I'd expect both of them to play again this week. And yeah, the Jota one, I totally agree with your theory and philosophy around his minutes. I think seeing him play 90 minutes for the first time as an owner should be sort of good news, and that you're not expecting that Forest game at all, but you'd probably be expecting a start in game week 22 would be sort of the way I'd look at it, like you said. I still think there's a good chance for minutes off the bench in game week 21, depending on the game state as well. Obviously, we saw, Diaz, I think, got a full rest. I think Gakpo did as well. He was left out of the team. So, yeah, it looks good for Jota owners if you can just be a little bit more patient. I know it's not really worked out as what we thought it would, bringing him back in, obviously, before those Leicester and West Ham fixtures. But it's almost like this is the second chance now, and I think we will see him get back into that team and start scoring some goals. So, yeah, I think the theory's good. And obviously, if you start João Pedro, like you say, he's either going to start and play full 90, which you wouldn't be too harsh against Ipswich at home, or he's going to not feature at all, and then we'll see sort of that Jota auto sub come into play.
Okay, so to round off the team, we've got Alexander Isak and Nicholas Jackson up top, and potentially, probably, João Pedro in there as well. Alexander Isak, really excited to own this week, and another one that had sort of a slight injury concern, but I think Eddie Howe loves to play the games, and he'll be straight back into the starting 11, so I've got no doubt about that. Nicholas Jackson has been a difficult player to own, I think is fair to say, with sort of the amount of sort of sheer number of chances that he's been getting. The returns haven't been there, but the stats are just pointing in one direction for a Jackson Hall, and I'm hoping that it's coming this week, especially considering Bournemouth conceded a lot of their goals in central areas from strikers. So that's been quite a theme from Bournemouth this season, just due to the nature sometimes of their high pressing and the way that they play and the philosophies that Iraola plays with, lends it potentially to being a really nice game for Nicholas Jackson. And then, of course, João Pedro, we'll have to just wait and see on that. Of course, that means on the bench currently, João Virginia, Jurriën Timber, João Pedro and Harwood Bellis. Yes, so the potential plan is Jota to be sort of first on that bench, ready for that auto sub to come on if João Pedro doesn't play. No plans on making any free transfers this week, sort of biding my time over the next couple of game weeks because we're fairly well set for the potential double for Liverpool, pending sort of maybe a change or two sort of in Jota, maybe Trent. We'll have to just wait and see. Josh, that's the overall team. What's the overriding thoughts on it?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think Nicholas Jackson, for me, I've not owned him, and I've been lucky not to be on the back end of some points there. I know obviously the minutes not been great necessarily, some rotations, some also 70-minute games, but I think when you're buying Jackson, you don't expect him to play 90 minutes necessarily. And obviously you got the full rest against Morecambe in the FA Cup, so I definitely expect to start against Bournemouth, who for me defensively have been decent this season. But yeah, I'd still expect Chelsea to win that game, as I mentioned earlier. So yeah, overall, I think it's the right decision. And yeah, the João Pedro decision to start ahead of Jota, I think, just makes sense. Obviously, fixture-wise, it's better as well. So yeah, no issues on that. Okay, then, so that wraps up our Game Week 21 team reveals. Make sure you hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. We are nearly hitting 4,000 subscribers, so if we can hit that before the end of the season, we'd massively appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. And as always, please remember to like, comment, and like Josh said, subscribe to the FPL Graduates. As always, I've been Ben.
I've been Josh.
And we'll see you guys
next time. Have a good game week, everyone.
So you may rise, but you'll never